Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Monday, November 23rd, 2020 Committee of the Whole meeting. I'm your chair this evening, Peter McKenna. We have a full agenda tonight, and I'll just take a moment to comment on it. There's two rather large items. All items are important, but there's two items that are a little more complex. One is the budget, and the other is the redevelopment proposal from the Gallipo Center. That will take us some time, so I appreciate your patience. Councillor Dwyer will be joining us shortly. She's on her way. And I'm very pleased. I'll just see if there's any amendments to the agenda before we start. Seeing none, the agenda is adopted as circulated. And I'm very delighted to welcome Smith Falls student councillor Sarah Lagarde, who is joining us this evening for her first meeting. Hello, Sarah, and welcome. And there's Sarah's mom, and it's very nice to see her, I'm assuming. Sarah, do you want to introduce us? Or, oh, sorry. Anyways, the second student councillor will be joining us at the next meeting. So we'll get back to Sarah. So we're delighted to have her. We have no any disclosure of monetary interest when you look at that agenda. Mayor Panko.
Yes, thank you, Councilor McKenna. I'd like to declare an interest in items both 8A, Gallipo Center redevelopment, and 8B, CIP application for funding, as I have a pecuniary interest of a professional relationship with my financial planning firm with individuals in these two items.
It's duly noted. Thank you. Hearing no other disclosures of monetary interest, we'll move. We have no delegations and no adoption of minutes. And I believe, CEO Morris, we have 3 directors' reports. But before we do that, are you able to just let the public know the staff that are on the Zoom meeting with us tonight?
Yes, I certainly can, Mr. Chair. We have a all hands on deck tonight, so to speak, from the senior management team. We have Chief Cheeseborough with us, Art Manhire, Troy Dunlop is here, Janet Kuziel, Carrie Costello, Jennifer Miller. We have Jason Barlow joining us this evening, Chief McGilvery, and Deputy Clerk Nadine Bennett.
Thank you very much. Just before we go into director's reports, Sarah, I did welcome you. You just had to step away for a minute. If you just want to take a minute and say hello to everyone and just tell them who you are and why you're here.
Okay. Well, hi everybody. My name is Sarah. I'm very excited to be here, as I said. I did apply, and I was actually, when I first talked to my principal, she was very surprised. She's like, wow, a grade 9 that's applying. So I'm very happy. I actually live in the country, so in Montague. I don't know what much else to say about myself, but.
No, that's great. We'll get to know you a lot better over the coming months. And I do want to let you know that you feel free to join in any of the discussions at any time. Raise your hand like everyone else and I'll recognize you. Unfortunately, the only time when we go in camera, you will not be part of that discussion, but everything else, there are no dumb questions. I can assert to that. I've asked lots of them, and so feel free to do that. So it's nice to have you on board. And I'd also like to welcome Councillor Dwyer, who's joined us right on time. Thank you. So back to CEO Morris and director's reports, and I believe we have 3 of them.
Yes, before we go into that, I omitted our senior planner, Carl Granke. He's here with us this evening as well. Good. So with that said, let's turn it over and hear from Chief Cheeseborough to start.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A brief update regarding last Thursday's Emergency Control Group meeting. The statistics for Ontario are at 102,000 confirmed cases. Canada is at 314. Lanark, Leeds, Grenville, we're up to 480 cases, 53 fatalities, and at that time we had 16 active cases. Just to put it in perspective exactly how fast this disease is spreading, from last Thursday to today in Ontario, there's been an increase of 5,000 cases. Across Canada, there's been an increase of 20,000 cases. So it doesn't seem to be slowing down in certain parts. As requested from our last presentation to Council, the Ministry has provided its framework, which is color-coded. We'd indicated that we are still in the green, which is positive. In order for us to move from green to yellow, Dr. Stewart had indicated it would take 19 confirmed cases a day for 2 consecutive days. So our numbers are, why they've increased, they haven't increased to that point where it's going to change our status. There are no cases in long-term care facilities. There are no outbreaks in the workplaces at this time. As the holidays are approaching, Public Health will be recommending staying within your family household bubble. They continue to communicate the 2-meter distance, stay at home if you're sick, wear masks if distancing isn't possible. One of the items that was discussed last week regarded the masks because the federal government has indicated that a 3-layer mask is being supported and preferred over a 2-layer mask. As we move away from the summer, the air gets drier, so the droplets seem to last longer in the air, potentially making COVID easier to spread. So as the masks are continue to be an important part of protection, the 3rd layer will help in the winter months. And they're suggesting an impermeable polypropylene 3rd layer to insert your mask inside the mask if that's possible. There has been a huge increase in the number of flu shots this year. They talked about influenza. At this time last year, there was approximately 700 cases. They've only had 17 cases reported. So the flu shot certainly is reeling some benefits. The province is preparing for mass immunization for the 2021. Pharma studies move into stage 3. Stage 1 being testing on animals, stage 2 on volunteers, and then stage 3 is putting that out to the general population. So we're looking between January and March, hoping to start the immunization. October to November, they're hoping to start the mass immunization of the population. The next item that was discussed was the increased exhaustion, COVID exhaustion at the arena, requests for exceptions and for different protocols and regulations. At this point in time, nothing's going to change with regards to our protocols or regulations. They're going to stay in place. We have been in consultation with Public Health. They continue to be involved and assist with the guidance for the interpretation of the protocols and regulations and anything that the province might bring down. Holiday preparations were discussed, so town staff will be working with the partners such as the Chamber and the DBA and service clubs to make sure the holiday initiatives will be within the public health recommendations to ensure public safety. So the Santa Claus parade, which is not going to happen, there's alternatives being proposed for that, and we're quite hopeful that that can take place. Some municipalities will be changing their status from green to yellow. Again, as of last week, Kingston had indicated that they'll be moving to yellow as of today, which they did. And some of the premiers throughout Canada are talking about the restriction of travel between provinces as well as restrictions within the province. Within Ontario at this point in time, there have been no changes, and certainly if the numbers don't continue to increase, we're quite hopeful that that will stay exactly where we are. That is my update for this evening.
Thanks, Chief. Questions or comments? Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, thanks, Chief, for and to the control group for your continued work. Last time you reported, you talked about that we had fireworks on hand. Has there been any more updates, or is there a discussion about that?
There hasn't been any further discussion through the chair. Sorry, there hasn't been any further discussion on that. We're still taking a look at what would be the appropriate time to do it, and certainly what would be the appropriate place. Again, working within the restrictions. We don't want to be out there endorsing people to come out and gather outside the current protocol. So again, with the regulations that are in place and depending on what the province is going to announce, we're sort of holding on that to see what the final outcome is before any final decisions are made.
Totally agreed. Thank you very much.
Seeing no other questions, thanks very much, Chief. Moving right along, Mr. Morris to...
Yes, next up we have Director Manhire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just have a few quick updates. The Festival of Lights, we're kicking off the season this evening. So in front of Town Hall, as well as down in Centennial Park, we have the lights on now. We will be adding a couple of pieces to it, and the DVA is also working with their contractor to do the main path in Beckwith. And they were working diligently this afternoon to get that up and running, and I'm not sure if it's going right now, but it will be shortly. We also have a couple of tenders that are coming up this week. There's the tender for the demolition of 54 Lombard and 41 Abbott, as well as the tender for the DVA flowers, and both of those close this week. Staff are right now reviewing the RFP that came back for the Parks and Rec Master Plan. We had 4 submissions for that. We're evaluating those submissions, and then we'll make a recommendation to council once we have that. We're hoping to have that recommendation before council for the beginning of December. We do have sponsors down for the Festival of Lights piece. We've got 13 sponsors from the community, and we changed the focus a little bit this year, where companies are providing donations, and we're turning around and providing that donation to the food bank, and we're acknowledging that sponsorship through signs down at Centennial Park. So keep an eye open for those, and there is still one opportunity available if anybody's interested. We also have lots of ice available at the arena between December 20th and January 2nd. So if people are interested, we are booking up for January in through the winter season, but there's still a fair bit of time between the December 20th and January 2nd timeline. So if they're interested, please call the arena. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Thank you very much, Director Manhire. And C.O. Morris, I believe you're up next.
Yes, so thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to provide a quick but important update on one of Council's advocacy efforts, and that's in the arena of the Cemetery Care and Maintenance Funds, affectionately known as the Perpetual Care Fund. So as I've updated committee before, we were invited after our lobby efforts to sit on a stakeholder consultation group. We did that over the summer, and that has resulted in a discussion paper that the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services released. It was just released today, I believe. So the document, it's fairly easy read. It's about 18 pages. But essentially there are 2 parts. The first part is to consider regulatory changes that would make it, that would loosen the restrictions on spending money within the reserve. And just as a reminder, we can only spend the interest earned on the reserve balance, not the principal. So there are a few suggestions in there to loosen those restrictions. We do have to bear in mind that municipal cemeteries are only one brand of cemetery. Most are privately owned, or community groups or church groups care and control over them. So the regulation and the changes apply to more than just municipalities. Clearly, the changes that we had put forth and have been promoting are certainly more flexibility, but ultimately to be exempt from the requirements in the regulation so that we can handle that reserve as we would any other reserve that we manage on an ongoing basis for operations. So part 2 of the discussion paper is exactly that. It's more of a long-term objective of potentially exempting municipalities. So I'm happy to say your efforts as council in lobbying for this are starting to bear fruit to the extent that the ministry is talking about it and have actually put forth a discussion paper to get feedback. The deadline to submit comments is January 19th, so there's lots of time. So staff will be putting together our submission so we can go on record once again as promoting more autonomy from the province as it relates to managing funds that, much like we do with probably 20 other reserves that we manage. So good news on that front. The AMO had sent out their update today. There's a link to the discussion paper if you're interested, but staff have certainly reviewed it and will be preparing comments in response. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any questions or comments? And for those watching, this is referencing our beautiful Hillcrest Cemetery just on the edge of Smiths Falls. So that is good work. We have a correspondence item, a letter from the municipality of our friends in Montague, inviting us to the table to talk about amending updating the agreement we have with our water in the Adirona part of Montague Township. I'm assuming council members have read that correspondence. Do you wish to say anything briefly right now, or do we want to add as a priority item, or ask staff to get back to maybe bring it back within 2 weeks? It looked like there was some, at least on Montague's part, they would like to hear back from us sooner rather than later. So I will just pause for a minute to see if there's any, okay. Now, if we want to have a discussion on it, we can add it as a priority item. If you just have a quick response regarding this right now, we can talk about it. So, Councillor Brennan, okay?
Yeah, no, I think this is this is longstanding and in my history it's come up before. I think that we need to have a little a staff report updating us on what's gone on, but and then we can have a discussion on it. But I don't think there'd be no point in having a discussion tonight without the history.
Thank you. Councillor Dwyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was hoping just to hear from CEO Morris about how he would recommend that we move forward. I assume that the receipt of this correspondence probably twins perfectly well with the correspondence that we just sent them regarding negotiating the annexation agreement. So Malcolm, how would you suggest that we proceed at this point?
Through the chair, what I can say is that this, the water and wastewater agreements have been discussed in the past, most recently in 2018 when we assembled with our neighbors in Montague to talk about a host of different cross-border partnerships. And those discussions did bear some fruit. It did not result in an update to the water and wastewater agreements. But I would say after reading the agreements, they are terribly aged. They need to be refreshed. And I think that would be consistent with what the approach council is taking with other longstanding agreements. So I would agree that it's something we have to talk about and we should talk about and make it more current. My suggestion would be, given the invitation you just referenced to Councillor Dwyer, that council appoint 2 members. I would suggest the same 2 members that are going to be talking about the annexation and revenue sharing for reasons of consistency. I think it would be important to have the same people at the table, and I would suggest that we talk about both matters simultaneously.
But not this evening, or it can wait till we have a meeting and you'll come back with maybe a little more detail. That's what Councillor Brennan suggested?
staff can do it either way. If council wants to talk about it tonight, we're certainly prepared to do that. But I think the summary I gave you is kind of the Coles Notes version of where we are today.
And where we probably end up. Councillor Alford?
Yeah, I'm empathetic with Montague in terms of dealing with old agreements. So I was going to suggest that we move it to a priority item to discuss. But apparently we're having the discussion now. So I'm fine with dovetailing it with the boundary adjustment because I think there is some crossover pieces between the boundary adjustment and water. So I think it would be prudent of us to combine those two. And I don't know that there's much more to discuss than what Councillor Brennan and Councillor Dwyer and I have said. So I would be prepared to move ahead and set a meeting with them, something similar. And possibly we're looking at the dates for the boundary adjustment discussions, so maybe we can fold it in there.
Mayor Panko?
Yeah, I was going to suggest we simply move to a priority item tonight, but if we're having the discussion now, I think we just need, I guess, clear direction from committee. And I agree, it makes sense to lump this in with the other discussions and that we will put them together, meet with Montague, and have an open dialogue on both issues. At the same time, I think it probably would be beneficial that the old reports are circulated to all members of council, so we have a chance to dissect it and share commentary with each other, or back to the group that we're discussing the issue with Montague.
Okay, Councillor McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we are going to move ahead with this, the way it sounds like the conversation is going, would it be possible to get an email package from staff to outline some of the historical documents associated with the agreement, so that for those of us that aren't as up to speed on this can just get up to speed, I guess, with what the history of this agreement is?
I'm assuming that would be easy to do. Yes, CEO Morris?
Yeah, for sure. We can. There are two agreements. We can distribute them to all members of council.
Thank you. It sounds like, I mean, we can add it as a priority item later, but there is a lot more to say. We're going to get the background information. The suggestion is that we tag team with the negotiations or discussions we're already about to have and proceed at least having that conversation with our friends in Montague, and council will receive the appropriate background information, and we'd probably have that in lots of time before that first meeting is set up. Are we okay then? Thank you. We are now going in camera, and we have two items. I'm mentioning this to the viewers. We will try to get through them as quickly as possible, but we will be back to you shortly. So I believe there's a motion to go in camera, don't we usually? Yes. Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor Brennan, all in favor. And that's carried, and you'll just bear with us while our IT folks Welcome back to our committee of the whole meeting. And again, thank you for your patience while we discussed two matters. One, council discussed with staff the acquisition or disposition of land. And secondly, potential litigation, and staff were provided with council feedback at that in-camera meeting. We're now moving on to item 8A, another exciting topic, the Gallipoe Center redevelopment proposal. And Senior Planner Granke is going to, has provided us with a report, and I hope members of the public have taken the time to go and look at it. It's a very interesting report full of good information. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Carl, to give us a high-level overview of your report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. Several weeks ago, a council heard a delegation presenting a concept for a very significant redevelopment of the Gallipoe Center property. So as council is aware, the owners of the mixed-use complex have linked up with the GBA Group development consultants to investigate the comprehensive development of most of the site, including the frame land surrounding the existing building. So as from their presentation, their plan calls for a total of roughly 1,500 to 1,800 new residential units of varying densities, as well as commercial and mixed-use spaces within the existing complex, which is proposed to evolve as something of a core to the new community, and also associated green space and open space throughout the whole site. So a new road network would also be proposed that would eventually be assumed by the town, including a new collector road linking the Ring Road to Lawrence Street. So this collector road is conceptually envisioned in our official plan and would serve to increase the linkages between the Gallipoe Center and the fabric of the rest of the town. And that's an objective that's outlined in our OP. So the proponents envision over the longer term, the municipality assuming the existing roads and services within the property in order to unlock the development. So firstly, staff would like to acknowledge the work of the GBA Group and their partners and what they've done and what they plan to do. We're working with an extremely experienced and capable roster of professionals on this massive project. So this report presents a high-level overview of the planning approvals and other work that would need to be done in order to make this plan a reality over the next 20-odd years. So certainly there's lots of questions that haven't been answered, will need to be answered, and haven't even been asked yet. So we're just taking a look at the overview of what this is going to look like moving forward. So as mentioned in the report, the official plan was approved in 2014, based in part by a land need study and population projection that forecasts an overall growth of about 1,100 people by 2034, and that's over the entire town of Smith Falls. So I think it's fair to say that Smith Falls world was very different those 6 short years ago. However, the plan that forecasts the anticipated growth over that time period would be within what it had identified as the existing urban growth area of serviced or easily serviceable land. So while the Gallipoe Center was recognized as a mixed-use development site and the lands along Queen Street tagged for highway commercial development, most of the vacant lands beyond that and a larger area of land to the north at the end of Lawrence Street are identified as a development reserve, which means they'd be opened for development to meet anticipated future growth pressures, but also have a broader look at infrastructure capacity and suitability on a broader perspective. So not just a piecemeal or site-specific process, but we'd be needing to look beyond the boundaries of the site. So the development and land use rules are also guided by a development permit bylaw, which is a unique planning tool that only applies to the Gallipoe Center lands within the town and prescribes planning rules on a prescriptive basis that also includes a stronger element of design direction. This system replaces zoning and site plan approval to form a single planning approvals process. Some municipalities have adopted a development permit approach in place of traditional zoning. And in Smith Falls, it was wisely adopted as a bit of a pilot, an alternative way to regulate this incredibly unique site. So I think it's the policy that I've been very interested to get to know over the last little while. The DPS, like a zoning bylaw, creates a series of policy areas, but it also does not permit development outside most areas outside the ring road. So I think it's fair to say we don't have the planning policy to support that the broad range of development. And that's where we're at now, and what the roadmap is going to look like. So the plan that's been put forward by the developers is intended to serve as a catalyst for the proponents to engage the town and others in seeking a mutually and broadly acceptable plan to accommodate development at the site. So it's fair to say it's very significant and transformational for the southern end of the town. At full build out, this proposal envisions enough housing to create potentially 3,000 to 4,000 residents, or more than a third of the existing population in the one area. So while we think that we've certainly gone a long way in terms of the overall population growth as envisioned in the current official plan, this is significantly more than that. So several planning applications would be necessitated to accommodate this development. So while the proponents seek draft approval for a subdivision plan, the appropriate supporting policy needs to be in place as provided in our OP. And council will also be asked eventually to approve either a revamped development permit system to accommodate the larger development area, or alternatively revert to a traditional zoning framework. I understand that the proponents at this point lean in the direction of the DPS update at this time. However, that's something that we'll continue to liaison with them and with you as this unfolds. We don't need to be making any decisions on that at this point. However, this all starts with the official plan as the important foundational piece that guides how we want to see development throughout the town and in specific areas of the town. And that's the first and foremost supporting piece for this development. So an official plan amendment, which would essentially be likely take the form of basically a secondary plan for this area, would assess the general future land use map and mix of the area, the efficient and coordinated extension of pipe services, the appropriate density and unit counts based on market demand and infrastructure availability, the phasing and development and identifying benchmarks and triggers for opening up a new phase, and also the relationship between this development concept and elsewhere in the OP. For a project like this, there's a very good chance that that updates and changes will be necessitated elsewhere. This is something that extends beyond just the boundaries of this property. And all of this would be guided and informed by a land needs investigation and appropriate servicing and infrastructure master plans. So I think with this in mind, given that the town has changed in the last several years as our OP has been in effect, it is prudent for us to consider where we want to grow next. And council will be asked by the GBA group through the upcoming applications that this is where that development should occur. And this will be a key policy decision that council will be asked to make. In the summer, staff met virtually with Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing staff, and it was confirmed that as the approval authority, you have the ultimate decision-making authority, subject to any appeals, of course, but also our responsibility is to ensure that planning applications are consistent with the provincial policy statement and fair to all interests within the community. It's clear that decisions regarding the full build-out of the site would have significant off-site impacts, including potentially economic impacts on other lands within the town that may be slated for development, as well as, of course, public services and infrastructure. So if we're expanding the settlement area boundary, the comprehensive review, which is identified with our OP, is about the demographic projections and ensuring we're not creating sprawl, but also looking we'll be looking to justify the expansion empirically rather than just looking at if they build it, people will come. And that's something that we'll continue to work on with them. So while the economic condition of the town has happily changed a bit since the land needs study and the population projection, it is fair to say the proposal envisions a population increase that exceeds what's currently planned for. And that's why we have to have that broader look. And in consultation with Public Works, we also expect the development of the site in its entirety is likely to generate water, wastewater, transportation demands that may have capacity impacts beyond the capability of the town's existing network. So in consultation with their team and our team, we would be looking at the master planning that may be needed to accommodate that and as provided for in the official plan. And these studies would need to provide details regarding the anticipated build-up program. And that would work to inform the policy development for the site and comprehensively. So the content of this report is for the most part presented for information purposes. However, there are two specific items at this early stage where we do seek council's broad direction. And the first one of that is a question of resourcing. So while staff are interested in tackling this once-in-a-career project, we also recognize that the complexity of the project, the process, and simply the magnitude exceeds the experience and the resources available in-house, and that this is truly a multidisciplinary endeavor. The proponents are hoping to make significant headway and potential policy approvals on much of the policy work by next year. And I think it's fair to say that this is a bigger project than can simply be accommodated into our routine work plan and exceeds the normal development, the day-to-day development that we would be normally looking at. So the policy and development review process for this proposal is similar in context to a secondary planning strategy, which is often resourced externally. And there are some really unique pieces of this property that do require that extra level of multidisciplinary attention and review. And that's that this entire site is single owner occupied as an individual parcel with, I believe, a road allowance going through it. Older services through the site, not necessarily following the street lines, and that's reflective of its previous iteration as the Rideau Regional Center. And also the site, the roads within the site are private roads, and they are proposed to be updated, and the proponents hope to be assumed within the municipal road network in time. So these are all, this is a very unique property. So in order to ensure the efficient processing of this application, staff recommend that council supports the preparation of an RFP for civil and planning engineering services on an as-needed basis to facilitate the review process in collaboration with staff, council, the applicants, and other stakeholders. As this is a developer-initiated process, we would propose that the arrangement be funded by the developer at no net cost to the municipal taxpayer and administered through a standing offer arrangement with a consulting firm. So that's, we're looking for council's direction on that. The other key item that we're looking for council's broad direction on is the Lawrence Street extension. So council will recall that last year we presented the idea of a secondary planning strategy for the Lawrence Street extension, and that was also presented in response to a lot of interest and pressure and inquiries that we were seeing for these properties, and within the theme of where do we go from here once we're already full. So these properties abut each other and collectively are about 500 acres, form a massive part of the southern end of the site. So if we're going to be looking at one, for the reasons of efficiency, it would make sense to look at the two of them together. So the proponents aren't necessarily opposed to this idea, but of course their concern is if we're tagging the Lawrence Street extension into the Gallipo Center, then there's going to be that may extend the process. So at this point, we're interested in council's broad direction as to whether you would like to still look at Lawrence Street and how as part of this. So decisions made in the coming months and years would have tremendous long-term implications, and a project of this magnitude necessitates a substantial multidisciplinary approach, and needless to say, it's one we absolutely have to get right. But at the end of the day, this is still an applicant-driven process where we liaise and manage the process through the statutory requirements, but it is a unique and impactful proposal, and it will take time. There is, however, some low-hanging fruit that can be approached while the work continues on the rear areas, and that includes the highway commercial lands that actually are outside the development reserve that can be developed much quicker along Queen Street. And certainly if there is demand for that, then that's an approach we can take on a much quicker basis. Again, I'd like to acknowledge the work put in by the proponents to date. We're on the early stages of a very interesting journey, and this will no doubt be the subject of many more reports to council as we start seeking direction on the key questions that need to be evaluated as we move on this. So I'll pause there and look for any discussion and feedback from council.
Thank you, Mr. Grenke. That was an excellent overview, and your report was very informative. Before I'm going to start with Councilor Dwyer in a minute, I would just ask that I suspect there's a lot of interest and questions. If we could have two per person, and then we'll come back around and we'll keep it moving and everybody will have a chance. So Councilor Dwyer, why don't you start us off?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to go back to the resolutions here. Carl, I have no problem with the idea of retaining the services of a full service planning engineering firm to do the work. I think that's a wise choice. I also have no concerns with the idea of including Lawrence Street in the analysis, and I think that's twofold. One, I think we've got lands within the urban boundary of Smiths Falls where we're collecting 100% of the taxes, and would on any new redevelopment, that we should probably be looking at first and foremost. And that's not just Lawrence Street. I mean, there's a sizable chunk of land behind the high school. We have 600 draft approved lots across 2 subdivisions. We've got a lot of land. So I'm cautious to jump the gun and assume that we're going to be growing into the Gallipo Center frame lands, which are outside the settlement area, first and foremost. And so I'm supportive of your recommendation. The struggle I have, Mr. Chair, and this is my only question, the first was a statement, the second is a question, is how are we going to cost share this with the proponent if the idea is to take a neutral and moderate approach to analyzing potential development in a comprehensive review without biasing the review? So if we're looking for the proponent to share 100% of the costs of the third-party secondary review plan, how are we going to ensure that the product we're getting is indeed within our interest? And quite frankly, how is that fair to the proponent either? If we end up with a comp review that says, yes, future expansion is necessary and you should be accommodating it on the Lawrence Street lands, that's a competing interest for the proponent's lands. So not only do I think it's unfair to try and justify that cost on their expense. I mean, unless they're going to commission this themselves and we become the reviewing party for it, I have some significant concerns with how we're equitably and ethically going to finance this and ensure that we're maintaining neutrality. And quite frankly, I'm not even so sure that necessarily we should be doing them as the same project. I mean, if there's concerns that we don't have sufficient growth land at this point within the town boundary, and it is within our own interest to do a comprehensive review, which it may very well be. I mean, there's no doubt our growth numbers have changed from the 22 homes that we had a year being built 5 years ago to what we're seeing today. But I think if we're going to do that, then we should own that and take responsibility for it. But it does mean that it's going to be $120,000 in studies that we haven't budgeted for. So that's really the crux of my question.
Yep. Okay. Have you got that, Mr. Grinke? You want to? Please.
Yes, Mr. Chair. That's an excellent question, and I pondered that in my own mind as well, looking at, I think there's certainly some efficiency in looking at Lawrence Street and the Gallipo Center, but ultimately there's going to be a question of who goes first and how's that all going to be accommodated. And that's something that certainly I don't have an answer for all of those questions now. And at this point, I'm looking for council's broad direction, I think, on how we want to sort of what approach we want to take on these matters, and from then certainly it warrants a follow-up and more detailed response and analysis to the questions that have been raised.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
yes.
One follow-up question,
Sure,
I promise.
Sure. No,
mostly because I want to change my initial thoughts. I would be supportive of including the Lawrence Street component of the resolution. I am not supportive of going ahead and commissioning a standing offer until we figure out how we're going to fund it. Thank you.
Okay, I thought it was to prepare an RFP, but those questions may be answered there, but we'll find out. And who else would like to speak to this? Councillor Alford?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And on most of Councillor Dwyer's points, I wholeheartely agree. I will say, and this is a bit of a statement, I'll get to one question. I understand staff's been working with the GBA group for most of 2019, but this has really landed on council's plate very recently. And this is a complex, there are some complex things to sort out. There are some complex things to consider. Councillor Dwyer's pointed out a couple of them. I'm wondering whether, and then we got this report, which is, as always, Carl, complete and wonderfully detailed, but I'm still processing most of what you told us in this and how I feel about it and what I think is in the best interests of Smiths Falls. And I'm wondering whether we're maybe getting a little ahead of ourselves. And I think it might be prudent for us to take another couple of weeks for everybody to really dig into this. I will say I was concerned about the arm's length arrangement for commissioning an RFP that would be paid for by the proponent. I think Councillor Dwyer hit on that quite well. I am in favor of secondary planning. This secondary planning has come up at PAC for Lawrence Street. So if there are some efficiencies to be had, I think we should avail ourselves of them. But again, these are big decisions. We're going to be making a lot of them. And I don't think this council, at least I won't speak for others, but I think I would like to have some more time to consider all of the pieces and parts about where we're going with this, to add, another third in terms of population and what that all means on many varied levels. I think I would like some more time to process all that we've learned in the last 4 weeks. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I had a couple of comments. Recently headed up a group who prepared an RFP for some work for a not-for-profit organization. It's significant. And the RFP process itself helped answer and address a lot of the questions that I thought, so that's my lens I'm looking at it is, if you're asking staff to actually prepare the RFP, a lot of those questions need to be answered, the scope of the project, how would be paid for, the ethical considerations. And I'm assuming that RFP would come back as a draft for comment. I think going through that exercise may help us, would help me inform the scope, the work, how it's paid for, and how do we put in those safeguards that both Councillor Dwyer, Councillor Alford have eloquently pointed out. When I think about development, paying for development, those ethical considerations must have been, and frameworks must be out there. This isn't unique, getting development to actually pay for it. So I'm assuming that that would be incorporated into an RFP. So at that point, I am interested in seeing the municipality go ahead and craft and start to work on an RFP for that third-party expertise, and then come back and say, here's everything that we've considered in the work and the scope, and that would be very helpful to me. And to Councillor Alford's point, which I agree with, it is, and Mr. Granke's pointed out, just the complexity and the unusual nature of this whole proposal. For me, the visual, when I heard we're going to have a roadmap, and you've quite well detailed it, laid it out in writing. For me, I wouldn't mind, and it would help me look at the picture, if the roadmap were linear and it was literally, here's where we are, this could be the end. And these are the steps along that journey, just pointing. I think that would help me understand just what the next 10 years are going to look like, or 5 years. And I think the public would appreciate, because I doubt that they'll read the 20 pages, and a lot of them will, but so that roadmap, if I saw that, that would help me get my head around it. The final thing that I'll just come in on, so I'm interested in the RFP, and I think during that process, we may or may not find it useful to include the Lawrence Street secondary planning strategy as part of that. My final comment is, if I ever wondered about municipalities being creatures of the province. It was hit home again for me in your second page under the official plan amendment that a critical role of official plan is to outline the best ways to accommodate growth while protecting provincial interests. And it didn't even say provincial and municipal interests. It said protecting provincial interests, which really clears the, just drives home that we are these creatures of the province. So again, I'm learning. It would have been nice to see that our interests, municipalities, are protected, but that's just an aside. Any other comments? Councillor Brennan?
Yeah, I agree with what you said, Councillor McKenna. I also agree with Councillor Alfred. It's if someone's not comfortable, then we shouldn't be making any decisions. But I do agree with you, Peter, that to go forward and to obviously this is too much for staff to do on their own. That's why the suggestion was made for requests for proposals to get some help in there, and I think we need that. And the proponents will shoulder that cost, as I understand, if I'm not mistaken. You can correct me if I'm wrong. And so let's if we don't have to make a decision tonight. I think this has been going on for a year or more, but I'm happy to agree with staff's recommendation in terms of that, and also the parallel one on Lawrence Street, because there's a connection there, obviously, and there's economies of scale and that sort of thing. So we got to look at that whole area. They're connected, but I'm happy to table it for now and until everyone's comfortable with going forward. It's a huge undertaking, and we got to do it right. So,
Councillor McGuire. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Councillor Dwyer has brought up some points tonight that I'm not sure if I fully understand them, so I agree with Councillor Alfred and maybe giving some time, but I would like to see potentially a draft of this RFP come together just so we have some substance to work with moving forward. I think the big question for me when I look at this is scope. Yes, growth needs to pay for growth, but when we were talking about this back when Mr. Bird came to visit council or committee of the whole, we were having discussions about, is our water treatment plant big enough? Is our wastewater treatment plant big enough? Questions that are really a town-wide problem, and I just want to make sure that scope's really well laid out, because I don't know if we're doing if aspects of this report are going to be town-wide. I don't know if it's fair to dump that on the proponent of this specific development, because some of the reports are going to guide development across town, and this is just the motivation of getting it now. I think I agree with Councillor McKenna. I'd really like to see some timelines and some work plans associated with things going forward, because it is hard to envision. It's I think back to, again, when Mr. Bird came to visit us, we seem to have a very ambitious timeline for the project, and they seem to be really keen of stuff moving forward. And I just want to make sure that we're both on the same page, because it seems like there's an opportunity here, and I don't want us delaying the project unnecessarily if there's an opportunity to get the capital invested in the property. And last, I guess my last comment is council did give some recommendations at our last discussion at Committee of the Whole, and I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to do a working group or some kind of continued dialogue with the proponent on the recommendations council made, just so that that dialogue continues and it evolves, and it's not something that comes to council in 6 months and we say, hey, no, this isn't what we were envisioning. I'm sure both sides are on the same page. So that's my take on the report. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Allen, I'm if you don't have to, but if there's anything you want to add.
No, I really agree with what has been said already. As I read this and reread this and gave it a lot of thought, it's a lot to take in and a lot to understand. And I agree with you, Councillor McKenna, about having the RFP. When I first read this, I thought that would be helpful. But even after that, I mean, my colleagues, I think there are going to be so many things for us to figure out and move forward so that this becomes something that's going to be helpful and useful to all of us. It seems so much like, you know, the number of units that they're talking about. It's a lot to take in. And I also agree with what Councillor Dwyer said about other areas of our town. And we have so many things happening right now, and I'm not sure I would commit to something this big when there are so many other things that I think we need to be looking after as well. But perhaps the RFP and more discussion would be helpful. Like, I don't think this is something that I'm prepared to make a decision tonight, an absolute decision on. Thank you.
Just so I'm clear, you did say you like the idea of the RFP, but you don't want to make that decision tonight on.
No, I would be in agreement with that. Whether or not to, you know, the Lawrence Street secondary part, I agree that could be included in it. Okay. But a timeline would be something that would be interesting to me, because I mean, it just seems like such a big project.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Now we can go back around if there's any other comments. Councillor Alfred.
Councillor Dwyer touched on it earlier too, and we are setting up to have that discussion with Montague in terms of the annexation and the revenue sharing arrangement there. I think I'd like to have a little bit of an idea, even from those talks, as to what direction we might be headed in, because Councillor Dwyer is right. We will be getting 100% of the property taxes from the stuff that's already that we're already working on, and this could be potentially a whole other ballgame, depending on how Montague sees things. So I would be happy with tabling this for a couple of weeks and revisiting it.
Okay. Anyone else before I'll jump back in for one more, if I could? I'm reminded earlier discussions a couple of years ago, we've talked about boom and bust, and we were in a boom phase and taking advantage of that. And Councillor Brennan, it reminds us that we are open for business and we want to develop our community. And without, we want to do that well, we have to do it well, but we want to indicate that we are ready to do business with developers and other businesses and wanting to move ahead in a positive way at a pace that doesn't demonstrate, and I'm not suggesting this, but we don't want to be wishy-washy. If we can say, yes, this is a good idea, let's start down that road. And nobody said we shouldn't. It's complex, but I do want to indicate to these developers and others that we are ready to work hard, and we're upping our game. This is a little different than our normal business, but we are ready. We're aspiring to do this. I think we've got an excellent team of staff, and if we did get some third-party help, I think we could move this along at a reasonable, business-like way. So now there's a couple of, yes, Mr. McGuire, and then I'll just see if CEO Morris or Mr. Grinke want to wrap this up. Go ahead, Councillor McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't disagree with putting it off. I just like really clear idea of what's going to be different when this comes back and what's the timeline for it coming back. Because as you say, Mr. Chair, you know what I mean? I don't want to give that kind of wishy-washy impression.
Okay, so there is, no one said we shouldn't do, flat out an RFP, and no one has said we don't need some third-party help. And there is interest in linking it to a secondary planning strategy. However, we also heard that there are other lands and other opportunities in our community that they're clearer and they may have a shorter term return on investment than this project will. And have we satisfied those enough? So there's interest, and I don't know, in a couple of weeks, I don't know if what other information we could provide. One of the questions was, how do we get how do we get the developer to pay for it, and yet it becomes our product, and the ethical principles have been implemented. So I don't know if Mr. Granke or CEO Morris, you want to comment, but Carl, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And certainly when it's not unusual with planning applications and somebody provides, say, a technical study that's beyond the expertise of in-house staff to assess that it gets peer reviewed on behalf of the municipality, and that's a cost that gets passed on to the proponent. In this case, we're dealing with that, but on a much bigger scale. And as council had indicated, this is something that's not just affecting this property. Decisions we make on this property affect decisions we make on other properties. And there comes that complex question of what's fair to charge to the developer, what's fair to our taxpayers. And this has been an excellent conversation. I've enjoyed it. And I think the sense I'm getting from council is you're interested in the idea of resourcing this, of looking at Lawrence Street, but I think but based on that, we need to do more work to determine what's fair. How do we create that review document and perhaps draft up an RFP that clearly scopes out who's responsible for what relates with what, and also work with the proponents so that this is fair to them. So certainly from my perspective, I have marching orders that I'm going to investigate these, work with my colleagues here in the office and with the proponents to refine and further detail that and bring that back to council. And I'll welcome additional if CAO Morris has anything to add to that as well.
Please.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I think this has been very helpful. I think we've identified this is obviously a very large project. The intent wasn't to necessarily make decisions this evening, but it was to get a conversation going about the things we need to attend to get you to a point where you're comfortable making a decision. So clearly we need to look at strategies to look at synergies around the two planning processes and how we might bring them together yet keep them apart, if I can put it that way. So we can do that. We can produce an infographic showing, putting a 10-page document into something visual, so we can certainly do that. And I think clearly there's an appetite to engage with our neighbors, so we'll consider that a priority. So I think that gives everyone a little bit of time, but we have lots of work we can do while you're contemplating the massive nature of this proposal.
And to Councillor, I saw a lot of nodding when you were saying that. So, and to Councillor McGuire's point, would it be reasonable that we would check back in, in a month, or is that unreasonable? Do you want to wait to the new year?
I think, if I may, I would say we would endeavor to have something back to you before the end of the year.
Okay. Does that satisfy everyone? Thank you. It was a very good conversation, and I appreciate everyone's restraint as we move ahead. We're moving along to the CIP application for funding. And again, Mr. Granke, you're with us on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make this presentation much briefer than the last one, but I'm bringing forward a recommendation from the Community Improvement Plan Evaluation Committee for a grant of $6,182.55 for a Program 1 facade improvement for the Lockmasters Tap House. So that's a new that's a new bar and restaurant that's moved into the former Fort Hemlock site at a very, very important part of the downtown, right overlooking the water. And the proponent has come forward with some proposed improvements, including the signage, the door, an awning over the front porch, as well as as millwork and a restoration of the facade and front windows. So some inspiration details have been presented to the committee, at which guide the visual for what this is expected to look like. And the committee was certainly very grateful for the work. This is the second. There have been some revisions from when this originally came to them. And the committee is of the view that this represents a significant improvement on the site and a good treatment for the property. So they recommend the approval of the grant as detailed in the motion. And I'll welcome any additional feedback from Councillor McGuire, who's the CIP committee council rep, and any feedback from council on this application.
Colleagues, Councillor Allen.
Yes, I was pleased to read this over, and I'm very pleased that Rob Dobson has decided to invest in this property. It's one that shares a great deal of history in our community, and the added bonus with him putting sports memorabilia and all kinds of local things inside at the pub. It's going to be a beautiful addition to that part of town. And I think now with the outside facade improving, it's just going to add to that. I think it's a big improvement. I read it over and was very pleased. I especially like the wooden sign. Like sometimes, you know, the facades are improved and the lighting is improved, but if the sign is very modern looking, but this one, I think it's very good. I'm very happy
great.
to approve.
Thank you. Councillor Alford?
No, I'm supportive of the CIP committee and staff's recommendation to go forward with this. I did have a question because I read through the minutes with regard to accessibility features, and that I think Councillor McGuire made mention of it during the discussion, and that there were not points considered for accessibility in terms of this, or I assume other properties. And so I'm just, my statement would be that I would be hopeful that accessibility plays a big part on CIP, as it should in many of our committees. So I don't know I'm not as familiar as Councillor McGuire on how this grouping, all these groupings that you speak of in your minutes and the award of points towards it, but I didn't notice that that there wasn't anything for accessibility features provided in the proposal or required in the proposal.
Councillor McGuire?
Thanks, Councillor Alford. I think there's a real opportunity now that we have an accessibility committee to get a representative on the CIP committee. I think that's an area that's been neglected, not intentionally, but just without having somebody at the table, it sometimes gets left out. I think that it's important to know that off the top of my head, I believe the funding request is about $6,100, $6,200 out of a total maximum potential ask of 10. So it's not like it's a complete overhaul, or that, you know, we're dumping the full ask out. And I think that the score of 67 is reflective on, you know, it doesn't tick off all the bases, but it does get a significant improvement to the property, as Councillor Allens noted. The one interesting thing about this property that is just not in the report, and just kind of background for the COVID CIP discussion, is that you know, when we talked about giving the CIP grants for COVID relief, this business has also done significant work on the back patio, making sitting safe, and even during the wintertime, they've added even more now. So I don't think that none of those improvements ever came to the committee, and it'd be interesting. I don't know what council's perspective would be on funding those kind of improvements as facade improvements, or as expanding that program too for that kind of stuff. But right now, I just wanted to make note that that kind of stuff isn't coming to the committee for funding. But no, I'm supportive of the application. I'm a little bit, I really hope they go with the kind of the black and the gold concept plan, because there's just a few different colors in the different designs, but it should be a big improvement for that corner.
Thank you, Councillor McGuire. I'm just going to bring in Councillor Lagarde, if I could, for a moment. When we read your resume, Sarah, we were impressed as a young woman just how broad your interests are in so many areas and how involved you are. What is your interest in downtown redevelopment or maintaining historic buildings? Do you have a, has that come on your radar yet?
I do not know much about downtown, but I believe that it is important to have certain historical buildings, such as the town council buildings, which are very pretty, as well as like downtown redevelopment. I found the new sidewalks are a lot better, but does it give the town a more modern look? So I am partial to redevelopment, as well as keeping some historical buildings.
Okay. That's great.
Thank you.
And I hope you get a chance to win the Tap House when they get the new facade on there. To have lunch. Thank you, Sarah. Okay. We're moving right along now. It looked like we had a thumbs up for that grant, and that'll come before council at our next meeting. We're into our discussion on the 2021 draft budget report, and you'll know that we have 3 or 4 more dates set up to finalize this. So we're not going to finalize it tonight, but Ms. Grazile is going to just give us a high-level overview and ask us some very specific questions regarding her report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think IT is going to bring up the Schedule 1 of the PowerPoint presentation for you to, we can review that together.
Okay.
Chairperson McKenna, I just wanted to let you know that I've shared with the mayor that he can return to the meeting, so he's just joining you now.
Thank you, Deputy Clerk Bennett. And welcome back, Mayor Panko.
So as indicated, this is Schedule 1 of your package. So it's a, I believe there's 19 pages we can go through here. So if you could just go to the next slide, Dave. So the guiding principles that staff used to prepare this preliminary budget is been prepared and reflects the vision within the 2019-2022 strategic plan and focuses on its core values. And starting in 2016, the long-term financial sustainability plan provided staff with guidance, especially with regards to our capital budget philosophy. So it's investing in reserves to fund future capital, which we know requires a disciplined approach to financial management. And finally, furthest to this, on October 19th Committee of Whole, Council provided guidance that the 2021 first draft budget should be compiled using the 2020 actual estimated figures plus the current average CPI for 2020, which is 1.1. That was as of August 31st, and September and October have both been posted to stats, and it is still at 1.1. So the next slide. So as noted, the long-term financial plan, we use this as a financial tool to begin our process, and it links the plans, the strategic plan, asset management plan. There are some things that are not included in the plan. It doesn't necessarily expand upon increases to inflation. Just to give you some idea, the plan is based on a 1.5 annual CPI. In 2017, it was 1.5. 2018, it was 2.4. 2019, 2.4. In 2020, 1.9. So again, those are things that are over and above what the plan dictates. And so also in the plan, there are some risk factors, growth estimates, interest rate, capital costs, as we know, are preliminary and just that, estimates, and new capital needs that necessarily aren't in the plan. And for instance, the 2019-2022 strategic plan are over and above what was in that original. So the next, just to give the original projections, as we have noted in the past, the water rates were projected a 7% annual increase, wastewater at 8%, and the long-term financial plan calls for tax rate increase of 3.38. Of that, 2.6 is earmarked for capital, in addition to a 1% assessment growth. So on this slide, this is just a very brief summary of Schedule 2, which is the consolidated operational budget. The overall expenditures, 25.3 million. Contributions to capital reserves, 2.3. The net tax levy is 14.8, grant and lieu 0.5, water and wastewater revenues 5.4. And just to denote, that revenue is not for the tax supported, that is strictly to be used for the water and the wastewater operational budget and capital budget. Further on, there is a slide that will say that there is still some subsidization from the tax supported. The provincial unconditional grant, which is the OMPF, has been confirmed. It will remain constant from 2020. And user fees and other revenues of 3.3 million. So one thing I did want to denote to the contribution to capital reserves on this current draft, it is a decrease from 2020 in the amount of about 632,000. And the increase, the overall operational budget is 723,000, which is a 4.2 increase. So next slide. Sorry, yes. So this is just a summary of the various departments and the percentage of the overall budget. And as noted earlier, there is some subsidization still for the water and the wastewater and distribution of 3.9%. So next slide. So as noted, Council had given direction to staff to include a 1.1 CPI increase to the water and wastewater and tax rates. So the increased taxation revenue, 157,000, increased water revenue, 28, increased wastewater revenue of 29. This first draft does have a status quo from 2020 for the community grant donations envelope at 140. And the proposed capital budget on your Schedule 3, tax supported at 5.9 million, water supported 491,000, wastewater 912. And below there is the allocations from the various funding, 66% being capital reserves. Next slide. So as indicated in the proposed rates, this is just an impact to the average residential water, wastewater billing, as well as the tax. And a total annual increase would be approximately $45. Next slide. And again, this is a breakdown of the various revenue sources. As you can see, a majority of it is our taxation. The OMPF accounts for 14%, fire dispatch 1.5%, and again, the water and the wastewater 20%, specifically for the water and the wastewater budget. So next slide. So this has been a challenging year to say the least. The county shared services, there was an increase of 340,000. Insurance premiums, we have spoke to our provider and they indicated that a preliminary increase to be based at 20%, which is approximately 61,000. Employee compensation increase of approximately 467,000, and group benefits increase of 10%, which is approximately 90,000. And as we know, our infrastructure is aging, yet there is on this current draft a decrease to capital of the 632,000. So next slide. So there are some factors still unconfirmed. The 2021 is based on preliminary plus the 1.1. We won't have our actual roll until approximately the second week of December, I think tentatively December 10th. So I'm hoping we might get that a little bit earlier so we can indeed have the actual figures in for the second draft, which is scheduled for the 14th. Excuse me, we still have not heard. I've reached out to my ministry contact on the OCIF formula-based funding, which is currently on the capital as a funding source of 605,000, which is status quo from 2020, but we do not know if that's going to continue as of yet. And as noted before, the community donations currently is at 140. The hospital donation has not, that needs council's direction, is not reflected on this draft. It's 2020 allocation. 2020 allocation was 174,000. And the CIP allocation, the program actually ended in 2019, so there is not any allocation on this draft. Again, that's up for council's direction. 2020's allocation was 44,000. Next slide. So this just gives you a bit of a summary on the assessment categories for each of the revenue sources for taxation. And as you will see, the majority of that is indeed residential at 64%, commercial 23.5%, and industrial 3%. And as noted in past reports, the assessment is going to remain at status quo from 2020. We were to have had our four-year cycle had ended, and in 2021, we would have had a new first year of the next cycle, but that is going to remain status quo from 2020. And next slide. And this is the same comparator chart that was used from last year. It did reach out, but unfortunately due to the pandemic, it has been difficult to get data from other municipalities. So this has not changed. So we are ranked out of 10. The prior year to that, we were 7th. Just something I wanted to point out here, Pembroke is indeed lower in taxation, but if you were to look at the next slide, which is the water and the wastewater, they are the second highest in the those utility rates, and Gananoque is the highest, whereas Smiths Falls is 5th. So to kind of compare the two, it is nice to kind of bring those two comparators together. So next slide. Again, same chart from last year, but going back the prior year, we were 3rd highest. So we have actually fallen down in the residential. So we're 5th highest there. In the commercial industrial, we remain status quo for the past 2 years in that ranking at 6th and 7th. So next slide. And this is just a summary of the debt, the overload debt and the repayments. Something I wanted to keep in mind from the highest point of 2013 to 2020, we have decreased our debt load by 4.7. And a good portion of the new debt was taken in 2010 and 2011. So it was about 15.4 million. But that was for the water plant and for the arena. And now in our municipal, or the municipal portion was 35%. So a good bang for our buck there. In 2013, new debt was taken on for 4.8 million, and that was police, the fire truck, and the palletizer. So 2020 was actually the second lowest since 2010 as far as our debt per capita. So I thought that was an interesting thing to note. And the 2021 repayments are to be approximately 1.6 million. Part of that is still a loan that will be taken out by year end, and that is subject to change. We might be slightly lower than anticipated, so that might bring that down a bit. So next slide. So the summary of our 2021 capital as it sits right now is 7.3 million, and it's funded from the following revenue sources. As noted earlier, about 40% capital reserves, federal gas tax, which has been, we know that amount, it has been confirmed. So that's at 11%. There is a carryover loan from 2020, and there is 500,000 in projected capital financing from the long-term plan that's on this current draft of the capital budget. And again, OSIF, formula-based, is projected to be on there. It has not yet been confirmed. It's 9%. The other small one is the 2% for the COVID ISIP resilience funding, which currently has been, is on the current draft, and it's for the, I think Malcolm is going to have a report coming forward for the complex renovations, the 3rd phase. And there are some project carryover reserves of 26%. Next slide, please. So these are just some of the highlights. The Lombard and Abbott intersection is 628,000. Town hall renovations, 1.4 million. Fire truck replacement tanker truck is 350. Again, it's going to be done over a 2-year period. Vehicle replacement subtotal of about 200,000. And the plow truck and wing, which is 285, just to denote that is a carryover from last year. Again, the total is 7.3 million, and the total transfers to reserve are 2.3. So next slide, please. Excuse me. So this is a summary of the action that staff are requesting of council this evening. These have been shifted slightly from the schedule 1 that I had given to you. I just thought it made more sense to look at these in this order. On the draft that I had given you, it kind of starts with the shortfall of the capital budget, which is 974,000. But if indeed some of these other decisions are made to defer, for instance, the rate increases, that's only going to amplify that shortfall in the capital budget. So I thought it made sense to start the way this is laid out. So again, the proposed rate increases 1.1 for water, wastewater, and tax. We need to, council needs to provide direction on CIP, community donation overall envelope, hospital donation at the 174,000. Again, the proposed new capital financing at $500,000. And the shortfall in the capital is currently at 974. And the other, there was a suggestion that we have a virtual public open house, and it was asked to potentially have that between the first and the second draft, which is scheduled for December 14th. So that's the direction that staff is looking to get this evening. So if you had any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay, we'll just ask, thank you, Janet. We'll just ask Dave to put us back to full screen if he would be so good. Thank you. Questions or comments from my colleagues? Councillor Alford, why don't you start us off?
Well, just initial reaction to Janet's reports is I'm not sure we're going to be able to maintain the 1.1% in terms of a tax increase. I'll start there.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Penko?
Yeah, I think it was a great starting point that likely isn't realistic at this stage. There's a number of capital items that we need to continue to invest back into our community. On the operational side, costs are rising, and so many things which are beyond our control. Increases in insurance, I think we're about $150,000, which I don't think there's much opportunity to find any cost savings there. We look at the impact from the shared services of the county. You put all that together, it's about $500,000 or about a 3-point increase on our taxes just with those items alone. So, first step forward, I guess, is we probably need to look at what that increase should be, and even if it's a 2% or a 2.2, doubling from where we are, we're still looking at a lot more work before we get this budget brought down to where we believe is something that's acceptable.
Thank you, Councillor Brennan. Sorry, Mayor Penko.
Go ahead, Sean. Janet. Just back to the our insurance. I mean, I know our employee benefits are something that have been rising. We got a break a few years ago, which saw a big reduction, and those have been rising annually. But our property casualty liability insurance, have we looked at our deductibles? Have we looked at methods to potentially reduce those premiums in recent years?
I can say that the insurance falls under the Director of Corporate Services portfolio. I don't think that conversation has been had. I do know we reached out to say, is this still a realistic projection? And they did say that at a future date, they will come back with us with something potentially different, but that is what we're looking at this year. So I can't say for certain. I do not think that Director Costello had that conversation on deductibles, but.
Okay, thank you.
Now, Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, thanks, Janet. And I lost my sound there halfway through your presentation, but Super Dave got me back on. But I read it a number of times, so I know what we're talking about. And you know, we were directed to the cost of living, and you know, with the other pressures, 340 grand from the county and the insurance is huge. I think that we need to look at the capital spending this year because, you know, those two things are big, but we're not going to get anywhere near, I think, what's affordable for people if we don't start looking at the plans for this year. I mean, we've got to take some water with our wine. It is a very, very difficult year. I'm hoping that that the upper tiers are going to help us out. I believe they will, but you know, we need to have an in-depth conversation about the capital works we've got here. We've got $300,000 in the budget for library rental. and some other things that we should take a real hard look at. I don't know if you want to do it tonight. I'm ready to do it, but we need to give staff some sort of direction on how we're going to proceed, because if we, I think in your budget line, Janet, was if we leave the capital the way it is, we're short 900, and that's a 7% increase, which is it's a non-starter, definitely. And so that's the bottom line. I mean, it's not rocket science here. We're going to have to look at the capital budget, and what are we going to get any more help than $175,000 on a 1.4 or 1.1 million town hall rental? I would hope we would, because that's a huge, and that's accessibility stuff and all the rest of it. So that's what we're going to have to look at, in my view.
Go ahead, Janet.
Just to reiterate on your point about the ISIP resilience funding for COVID, we did reach out to them. That is our maximum, the 175. The way the allocation came forward, we thought perhaps that was the provincial component only, as opposed to the federal as well. That's not the case. And there is no stacking on that as per the application guide. So that is going to be funding.
Yeah, through the chair, stacking would be any other grant.
That's correct.
Okay.
CAO Morris will be bringing forward a report on that this evening, I believe. Yes.
Other comments or questions? Mayor Penko?
Not to occupy all the time, but I mean, we know that we look at our water pollution control plan, and there's $600,000 in pretty, I believe, probably essential stuff. I'd like to hear from Jason or Troy with regards to the bar spring replacement and the PLC replacements. And then to Chief Cheesebro, the tanker truck. And I mean, I know that the one we have is either past end of life or near end of life. I know it's still functioning, but they do have a limited lifespan. I mean, it's a big ticket item, and I'm not sure. I'd like to understand more about how we utilize this truck, because I would tend to think within our geographic boundaries, we rely on hydrants to supply water for fire suppression. And I assume these are used more in mutual aid and also in our agreements with Rideau Lakes and Dermot North Elmsley. And does the agreement speak to capital and how that is funded?
CEO Morris, do you?
Yeah, so I think we need to start answering some questions. So let's start with the chief, with the mayor's most recent question, and then we'll go back and answer the question about insurance.
Thank you. Through the chair. Your worship, there is life expectancies on vehicles. The fire underwriters is the certifying body that grades the vehicles and provides the life expectancy on the vehicles. From years ago up until current, a full-time department for a first-run vehicle was 10 years with a second-run capability of 5 years. In a composite department, Smiths Falls, it was 15 years first run, 5 years second run. And in a total volunteer department, they started at 20 years first run and 5 years second run. Now, I spoke with fire underwriters as of last Thursday, and I reviewed those age groupings for the vehicles. What they've done is they have reviewed and they have altered their age requirements for the vehicles. They are now saying that pumpers can go between 20 and 30 years. And again, this is dependent on obviously use. A Toronto pumper will not go 20 years or 30 years. To make it more reasonable for municipalities to be able to sustain the vehicles, they've increased that age. The one exception was tankers. Tankers have the highest rate of injury, fatality, and serious injury with regards to safety issues. They have capped the life expectancy of a tanker at 20 years. Now, when I reviewed the proposal from the former chief, he had indicated in his report that the vehicle was to be replaced in 2014. That got changed to 2016, and in 2016, he proposed the elimination of that vehicle. Unfortunately, our contractual agreements with Rideau Lakes and Drummond North Elmsley that generate currently $80,000 a year is built into the contract for a pumper, a tanker, a rescue, and staffing. So we are committed to those agreements for the next 2 years, until we have negotiations to renew them or extend them. The price of the vehicles is certainly, in my opinion, it's outrageous, but we have no control over that. So in an effort to try to ease the burden with regards to that replacement vehicle, was to span that over 2 years, same as we did with the pumper replacement. Now, again, that vehicle, if we kept it in the town of Smith Falls, unless there's a massive outage or a water main break, we rely on municipal water. But for mutual aid, as you'd indicated, and for those contractual agreements, that's built in. The initial cost of that tanker, from what I've been informed, Smith Falls paid 50% of. I believe it was Montague or the county paid the other 50% when it was first acquired. And again, we can get the documentation from the fire underwriters who indicates it will not have an effect on the municipal rating and the municipal grading for the town of Smith Falls, but it will have an effect on those jurisdictions that we serve through automatic aid, just because the vehicle has outlived its life expectancy by 7 years. If we were to delay that by another year and offset that $350,000, I can't state with any certainty that the cost is going to remain the same. I don't think it will. And again, that puts us another year farther down the road with other impending capital items that have to be purchased.
Thank you. And then, so that was the first question.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, I would refer the original question about the insurance to Director Costello.
You may remember, I'm going to estimate probably back in 2017, we did increase our deductible from 10,000 to 25,000. We have had discussions with our insurer, and she has indicated that it's not an indication of the number of items or the number of cases that we have sent their way, but more the volatile market right now. So she's gave us an estimation of anywhere from 15 to 20% increase, and for the sake of budgeting, Treasurer Koziel has erred on the side of caution and put together the 20% increase.
Thank you. Thank you. So I mean, deductibles are pretty significant, but I guess in areas where there may be extremely low claims or very low probability of claims, I guess I question whether there's an opportunity maybe to increase the deductible further, self-insure a little bit more in order to potentially save someone some premiums.
I think, Mr. Chair, that's something we can have a look at. We did, as Director Costello indicated, engaged with our insurance provider to understand what risk management items we have under our control and how we can contribute to controlling those costs. So we will be acting on those things, but it seems the pressures are more external than direct claims that have been made against the town of Smith Falls. Mm-hmm. But we can certainly check on the deductible and see if we can push that further.
Thank you.
And if memory serves me, there was a question regarding, just to confirm for Mr. Barlow, that those capital items mentioned are indeed, there's not a discussion on whether they're could be delayed or not, but can that be just confirmed?
Yes, so I would refer that to Director Dunlop.
Okay, Director Dunlop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You've probably seen the PLC replacements and the bar screen upgrades on the budget several times over the last couple of years. These are complex projects. In terms of gauging importance, the PLC upgrades are the more important of the two. The programmable logic controls are essentially all of the automation that SCADA uses to operate all the equipment in the plant remotely. We operate on a Bristol operating system that is essentially redundant now. We've been managing to keep this system operating by virtue of getting parts from those who are already changing out and putting parts in the market, but it's technology that we do have to do a change out on. So very important project. And again, we've had some close calls with some boards failing in the last couple of years, and it's something we need to move forward with. The bar screen replacement is, again, original equipment, and every single drop of sewage that comes through the town does go through these bar screens, and essentially they remove all the floatables, your rags, debris, the stuff that you don't want to get down to your pumps. That equipment is essentially original equipment that does need replacement. And again, we've had some delays in launching that project in recent years because of scope creep, also some of the cost influences from these parts originating from the US. So we're working with RV Anderson still on those details as we get closer to the end of the year. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Janet.
Just to reiterate on those two budgets, if you look at Schedule 3, the water is actually only about 278,000 coming from this year's capital reserve. The balance is from a carryover from previous years that were approved projects. The wastewater is only 240,000 on new capital reserve projects. The rest are carryovers from previous years. So there's not a lot of deferrals there as far as new projects. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Thank you. Councillor Alford, you wanted to make another comment?
Just to ask a couple questions. So the average CPI that you're using, Janet, that's the average over the last number of months in 2020, but 2019's CPI at the end was 2%. Is that correct?
I believe it's 1.9.
1.9.
But they tend to be, like I just got October's, so they're about a month delay before we'll get the next month's. But as I say, it's been holding consistent since August.
Okay, and you've made our it quite clear what we would need to do in terms of the tax supported capital budget. If we can't defer it, and there only a tax rate increase, decrease operational spending or capital financing, if there's nothing in the capital budget that we can defer to another year or eliminate. I haven't heard anything so far. So then we're left with three choices left, which is financing or a tax rate increase. It's the 974 is huge. So.
And
CEO Morris, did you want to jump in there?
Yes, thank you. Just a point of clarification. The questions about the bar screen and the PLC, they were carryover items, so they're not affecting this year's levy, so to speak, or this year's capital budget. So, but I would like to offer that you can always defer items. That's your prerogative to defer them. We're just saying, here's a group of things that we believe as staff need to be done. Some are carryover; they've already been deferred, so we should get on them. We have to get on them eventually. So none of these are optional items, but when we do them is entirely your decision.
Okay. If I could jump in.
My question would be, sorry, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
My question would be then, what would staff recommend in terms of a deferral if there is one, rather than us trying to guess what would they recommend as a deferral?
Perhaps I would defer that or refer that to Janet.
Yes, please.
I just want to make a point too. Right now, it's the way it sits presented tonight is the shortfall, 974. Council have yet to make decisions on the CIP, community donations, and hospital donation. So if all of those you were to say, okay, add 50,000 for CIP, add 174, you now have added to that shortfall. So those perhaps are things you need to decide, and then staff need to say, okay, now we need to find something to offset, say 2.2 million or 1.2 million. just throwing a figure out there. So there's decisions to make that could impact what changes on that capital budget. It's not 974,000. It could potentially change. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Okay, well, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair,
Okay,
if we work from the bottom of Janet's list on the thing, the hospital donation is 174, which is the same as what we did last year. Does this council think that we need to do that again, or is there the possibility that we can make that less, make that 100,000? Same with community donations. I think we've still got $15,000 left at the end of the year. Does the overall community donations need to be 140K?
so you're asking a rhetorical question, or what do you want? Do you have an opinion?
Well, political will be in place here. I see Mayor Panko is going to probably make a case for something. So I just don't, we can go around and around tonight, or we can make some decisions, or.
Okay, CEO Morris, and then I'll go to Councillor Dwyer.
Just a quick comment that Councillor Alford's statement sparked in my mind. We budgeted 140 for community donations because that's what we budgeted in the past. The community donations applications close on Monday. So we'll have a much better idea whether the donation or the requests exceed or don't exceed the 140. So there may be an opportunity if we get requests for 100,000, we will come back and recommend we lower it to 100. So that's a little bit of a moving target. I just wanted to offer that as something that you may want to defer the decision on that one until we find out what the extent of the applications are.
Okay, Councillor Dwyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to try and go relatively quick here because it looks like I have a very unstable internet connection. So, Mr. Chair, can you just confirm I'm not cutting out right now?
You're doing okay. It's a little sketchy, but it's good.
Okay, I'm going to go fast because I think I'm going to lose the whole thing altogether. I'd like to have a separate discussion altogether about the hospital donation because I think there's a lot of things to unpack there. Including the fact that we went into this last year with the mindset that there was going to be partnership participation from other municipalities, and that was not nearly as successful as we had hoped it was going to be. I do want to see us continue to fund the CIP, and I think it's important for two reasons. One, our businesses are still battling with the fallout of COVID, and two, we've just made a sizable investment in our downtown. And typically these programs are most successful on the back end of municipal investment in infrastructure. So for those reasons, I would like to see us put something in the CIP. It doesn't necessarily have to be the sizable contribution that we've made in previous years, but I would like to see us put some money where our mouth is on that one. As far as a tax rate increase goes, I'm having a really, really hard time stomaching that. Given the COVID landscape that we're living in today. So first and foremost, I'd like to see staff rather take a look and come back with deferrals out of capital, but I also want to see some operating adjustments. And I said this last year as well. I find too often the low-hanging fruit tends to be the capital deferments because you can make one cut and cut a sizable amount. There are a lot of things in the capital budget that keep getting cut year after year, and I'm not prepared to do that again, particularly on our parks. I mean, we literally have two play structures in our parks that are falling apart. They are a health and safety hazard. I mean, you can't just keep cutting it year after year. So I'd rather see some operational cuts. My last preference would be to look at a tax rate increase, but I think ultimately we're probably going to have to come to some sort of compromise on that one as well. So I think that's all I have. Hopefully you got all of that.
Very succinct, thank you. I'm going to go with Councillor McGuire, then Mayor Panko, and then I think Councillor Allen had her hand up. Okay, Councillor McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first election promise in my platform was cost of living tax increases, and on the first draft, I'm not ready to give up on that yet. I think you know, this is going to be a tough year, but I think there's more effort we can look at. For example, under capital deferrals, the Lombard Abbott intersection project is a project that would be eligible for Connecting Lakes funding. Right now, obviously, Beckwith's the priority, but if the detailed designs are going to have a date that extends past next year that they'll be valid for, that'd be something I'd be okay with deferring. I think for the CIP program, the reality is that we don't have the staff resources to complete the program assessment effectively right now. It's dragging on. Staff are doing a really good job. They're diligent with it, but we're not getting deliverables. And I think that this is the year, with the budget being as tight as it is, to maybe pull back on that, just carry over the funds that are remaining from this year. I think we're about $35,000. And then look at, you know, reinstating the 50,000 or even more, depending on how the review goes. But I think if we don't take a breather at some point and actually look at what we're giving out funds for and what kind of value we're getting for those funds, we're just going to be constantly, the CIP program's never going to be reaching its full potential. So I definitely support carrying over the funds we've got, but I wouldn't support giving another 50,000 to that. I think with COVID, this is the year, like, this is a real COVID budget, and the kind of services we're going to be providing as a town have been significantly different over the last 6 to 8 months, and I think they're going to continue to be different well into 2021. I think that as a council, we need, as Councillor Dwyer just said, we need to take a good look into the operational budgets and see what, you know, where we're getting value out of those, and what maybe opportunities are there for different levels of service to be provided for 2021, looking at the climate we've got with COVID. So that being said, there's sorry, I lost my page here, but anyway, that's good for my comments for now. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I know, Ms. Kazil, did you want to respond to something, or?
Yes, I just wanted to confirm the CIP, the current balance. Councillor McGuire had indicated 35. It's actually 26,000, so it is slightly less than what he had indicated. But I just wanted to give you to give clarification there. So.
Okay, is that good, Mayor Penko?
Yeah, on the CIP, we also recently approved funding towards the Dematcha Red Grant for a lot of facade improvements on 20 buildings in the downtown. And I think it's, if we're going to follow through with that, we need to make sure there's money in the CIP to actually complete the work that the design will create. Now, what the number may be, if we had 20, maybe perhaps 20,000 to the existing 26, it gets close to the 50 where we were before, as one consideration. I guess we look, again, go back to staff. I guess staff can go back and I think take a careful, even a more careful look, even though they've been careful so far, at some of the capital. And I mean, I know it always means deferral. And as much as I hate to defer items which are critically important, even within the water pollution control plan, a deferral of one item there may free up capital reserves for some of the other budgeted items. This is going to be a real challenge to get us down to any number that's going to be acceptable. And we know we're probably looking at maybe some financing. And when we're completing a project, say $1 million plus, $1.4 million, phase 3 on Town Hall, it probably does make sense to consider some financing, and especially I would assume where interest rates are today, that we're borrowing at less than 2%, perhaps even close to 1%, which it may make sense to take advantage of those rates in order to get some critical work done, understanding that the inflationary factors on some work means the cost will be more expensive in the future than what we'd be paying in interest and financing charges now. On the operating side, I appreciate what's said. We've been through a service review, and we have found some savings over time. I think there's a couple items left from the service review that could come up with further savings, but I have a lot of confidence in that process, and it did go deep and broad. And I think on the operational side, I think we are running quite lean. And I guess the decision for council will be, are there services that we're no longer going to provide? If that's the case, that's a much more difficult discussion to have. But if we're concerned about creating ongoing savings, then that's something that we may want to possibly consider. The hospital, I agree, is probably a more fulsome discussion that we should have separately. I definitely want to keep it in there for now. I'm prepared to talk about it now or at a later date, but again, I don't want to see that removed at this stage. I think there's incredible merit there. We were able to leverage that at the hospital level for support elsewhere, and it helps attract doctors and whole work. So that's a more fulsome discussion I think we need to have. And I guess the other part was, I guess, if we're looking at the construction work that's scheduled, Condi Street, and then some detailed design for George, and anybody who drives George recognizes there's some major work that needs to be done there. I guess we have to almost look forward to 2022, and do we expect to be in a position to undertake a major construction project on George? And if we're not, perhaps the detailed design work could be deferred until 2022, and that work could happen the subsequent year. So I'd like to have staff take a deeper look at some of these items.
Thank you, Mayor Penko. I'm going to, Director Dunlop has put up his hand, and then I'll go with Ms. Kozil, and then I'll get back into the queue with my colleagues. So Director Dunlop, please.
And just really briefly, just want to identify that, you know, we've had a lot of successes with our capital program in the last 3 to 4 years. You know, we've received a lot of funding support from the province and federal levels for that. One of the downsides of that is we've really depleted our bank of construction-ready projects. George Street, as an example, is seen to be a very critical project that fits a need in terms of environmental, climate change, also public health. It's an area that has a catchment of about 8 hectares. We put a stormwater treatment unit on Old Mill in there 2019 to service that area. If grant programs are to come out for climate resilience or to help the health of the river, I see that project as positioning us to really fit those types of environmental grant programs. So part of the motivation of including that project is to fit the criteria that we're seeing over and over from the province. It's also a project that we believe we could garner written support from the Medical Officer Health and also the Ministry of Environment. So.
And it would add to your list of shovel-ready, which we don't have right now.
Correct.
Or it's diminishing, okay? Ms. Kozil, you wanted to jump in?
I just want to, Mayor Penko had indicated about leaving in the hospital donation at 174. It is not in this current draft. I had not received direction to do so. That's a council direction to be given. And that was one of the items. If you want me to put it in for the second draft, it's not in this current draft. So it will add to the pressures.
Right, and what I heard from my colleagues that they'd like to have a discussion about whether or not, and I don't think that was intended for tonight, that hospital discussion, but
I just wanted to reiterate it. It's not in there right now.
Right.
Indicated to leave it there. It's not there.
Okay, we haven't heard from Councillor Allen, and I think she had her hand up, and then I'll go back around.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. I think that, you know, we have a long agenda to get through more priority issues. And I think that there's more information that Janet's going to bring to us. And I think it's going to come down with that kind of a shortfall to us going through item by item and looking at how we can come up with the amount of money. It can't all come from taxation, but we could do some changes in what we're going to put our money, capital expenses, and we're going to have to do that because it's a lot of money. But I agree with Mayor Penko. I would not be, I would not mind us borrowing. We've done that for other things, and we may have to look at a combination of deferring items and borrowing money as well to get to that number because it's a big one. And I think it's going to take too long tonight to go through it, and we're not even dealing with the absolute numbers. I think that Janet's idea of coming back when we're sure of more numbers, and especially now knowing that the hospital is not even in there. That's a lot of money, a big difference.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Allen. I'm going to make some comments if I may, and then I'll come back and just wrap this up. One of the things that I want the folks watching to understand is that every municipality in Ontario is having a very difficult time over the last 20 years. The locally supported tax base, the residential portion of that has gone up and up and up, and we're up around 60 or 70% that is funding this. Where in the past, it was either industry and a much more generous provincial policies in place to support municipalities. So this struggle that we're having is not unique to us. The other emphasis that previous councils understandably could not see, it was more difficult to look down the road to see the end of the new infrastructure they had put in place. The sewage treatment plant, the water treatment plant, they had felt that, you know, that was a long way off, so we don't need to be focusing on putting money into that pot as we maybe should have. But when you see the recent development in Smith Falls and the proposal from Gallipo, the end of life of those infrastructures is clearly within our sightlines. It's just a few years away. It's not 20 years anymore. And we are not putting money away for that. So I agree with Councillor Brennan that 7.5% increase is not on the table. But I also agree with some of my colleagues. I think there has to be something beyond 1.1, as well as all the other suggestions that we've been having tonight. I think there has to be some give. We're not doing our job if we're just dealing with this year and we're not looking ahead, because if we see the end of life for those major infrastructures, they're right before us. And so those are my comments. I think we need to have something in between. The one, I think Councillor McGuire's point around this being a COVID time, when we did those service reviews, it wasn't with the knowledge we had of actually pivoting and going to the amount of workarounds and what we've learned, not just as a municipality, but as a community, on how to do things remotely and how to do things more cost effectively. And we've not done those service reviews looking at technology and what it could bring either in savings or efficiency. So I don't think we can do it in the next month, but it might be a different lens we would look at the operational side. We have December 14th coming up. There was interest in using that opportunity to have the public more involved. I'm hoping they're all watching. I hope they're reading this. We do want to hear back from you, every one of us, on comments on this draft, comments on the hospital funding. We want to hear it all. And I think December 14th, I'm hoping, I think that was the intention, is we'd have some way of having a virtual town hall. I'm not sure what the thinking was around that, but I would like to hear from our public and the ratepayers on what they thoughts are on our budget deliberations. That's the end of my rant. Janet, and then we'll go to Councillor Brennan and maybe wrap this up.
Okay, I just want to draw council's attention to Schedule 2. To the right-hand side, I kind of gave an overall of the percentage of payroll related to our budget, which is about 50%. Overall long-term debt repayments is 6.2. I dug a little deeper just to give you an idea. I just want to caution council that there may not be the discretionary spending for staff to find the savings to the extent that we've denoted. Total capital transfers to reserve are 8.4% of the budget. Shared services are 14.1. Utilities are 5.1. Waste management, 2.8. Community programs, no, that's inclusive of the hospital, would be 1.3. Professional fees, 1. Training, 1%. So you're down to, without going any deeper, about less than 15% of discretionary spending. And when I say that, it's office supplies, that sort of thing. So it's not like you can totally defer those items. So I just want to caution council, there may not be as extensive cost savings in the operational budget as you're hoping for. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
That's a great point. Councillor Brennan, Councillor McGuire, and I'll leave the last word with CEO Morris if he wants to inspire us at the end.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I've got a bunch of notes here. You know, I realize the time is, we're 3 hours in, and I don't think there's a lot of appetite to get into the weeds. I'd love to. But there was a day, other terms, where we'd have just a budget meeting. And oftentimes, I mean, the county used to do it on Saturdays and have budget day. I think there's some usefulness because if we come back December 14th, I don't think that I've got questions about some capital stuff. I'm not going to get into it now. I don't think anybody wants to. But I'm wondering if we could, is there any appetite or usefulness to get together virtually before that? So, you know, we could do a little bit of line by line on the capital and have, you know, have Troy or whoever answer the questions. We started to do a bit on the trucks and that type of thing, but you know, I to have a public meeting where we're going to be the ones asking the questions. Ideally, if we had a virtual public meeting, the best thing would be to have people sign on and ask us questions. So I'd like to have some better idea where we're going before that. So I'll just put that out there.
Yeah, no, I think it looks like, according to this slide, the December 14th is a special committee of the whole just to deal with the budget. Is that the understanding?
Mr. Chair, that falls on the night of a regular committee of the whole meeting.
Oh, okay.
But I think Councillor Brennan raises a good point. It may be too much to ask to talk about such a large challenge if we simply tack it onto an already busy agenda. So what I would suggest is that we look at perhaps an opportunity to solely talk about the budget. And that would be the focal point. So if there's agreement with that, we'll come back with a date or two that we can propose where we don't have a litany of other things to talk about and decide on.
Okay,
budget day.
Yeah, okay. There's a lot of nodding. Great suggestion, Councillor Brennan, and staff will come back with that. Councillor McGuire, do you still want to make one more point? Please do.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I agree with, I'd love to have a budget day that's on a separate day. Even a Saturday would be great. I think just to follow up on the CIP discussion and the red grad, these are huge, these facade improvements are not small projects. And the program one, the way it's designed right now is wholly inadequate for sponsoring these kind of redesigns. Like these redesigns are going to be in the cost of 20, 30, 40,000, even, you know, you could get up, it's going to get up there if somebody really wants to redo it. And we don't have it's going to take a lot of planning. The renderings aren't going to be done until the end of March. And then the planning begins. So to take a break this year and double down next year, I don't think is going to compromise the integrity of the Becker Street revitalization. But operational stuff, I'm definitely hearing a consensus that we want to take a deeper look at capital. I know Councillor Dwyer, I don't know if she's still here, but she echoed it when she had her time. Is there an appetite for council to dive into the operational stuff? Because I think with COVID, it's significantly changed. I hate to single out specific lines here, but between economic development and tourism, we've got $338,000 budgeted for 2021 right now, and I don't know if we're going to be providing the same level of service with the way tourism and economic development has evolved. So that's just one example. I'm sure there's other opportunities potentially in here to find some savings, but despite salary and utilities and all of those base expenses taking up a significant portion, there's still big numbers on the table in the operational budget. So last point is when we talk about tax increases, I think we really need to be cognizant of the assessment inequality in town. There's huge discrepancies between neighborhoods of what houses are worth. And this goes back to, you know, the 2008 to 2018 decade where there wasn't a lot of growth. But when you're looking at a $50,000 assessment difference between different neighborhoods in town for houses that are selling for relatively similar values now, you know, we've got, it's 1,500, you know, there's lots of houses paying $5,000 in taxes, and then there's lots of houses that are only paying $3,000 at the average, and then there's houses paying under that. But I think we need to be cognizant of that range because it's, the average isn't necessarily what the most people are paying in town. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. So, okay, Janet.
I just want to reiterate on the fact of the new assessment and the boom we've been through. We haven't caught up to that cycle yet. We're still hinging on the old cycle that ended in 2020. So you may see indeed the assessments, as you're well aware, they have gone through the roof in the next phase, four-year phase. So that's one thing. The other thing I wanted to mention on perhaps the next format, Councillor McKenna and the mayor attended the counties, and their agenda was quite well laid out in that they had a 10 to 15 minute period for each director to get up and kind of present there or be ready for questions from council. So I don't know if that's something you would want to entertain as opposed to myself, you know, I know the numbers on the books, but to give justification to those numbers, each director perhaps could do that more justice. So that's just a thought.
So we'll look at that format, and staff can maybe suggest a format. It was long. It was from 9 till 2. Just reviewing programs and services. We didn't finalize the budget on that day. Okay. Well, we have a couple more items. One of them I know is time sensitive. Are we okay to move off of this important topic? And thank you all. Your input, it was terrific. The
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Chair. The one you're thinking is time sensitive is the conservation authorities?
That's what I understood.
Is there any, I guess D2 as well, CEO Morris?
Yeah, there was 2 of them.
Okay. Just trying to get rid of one of them.
Well, they should be fairly expeditious. Yes, Clerk Bennett.
I just wanted to let you know, Councillor Dwyer has left the meeting. She had a bad connection, so she has left the meeting for tonight.
Okay, duly noted. Thank you. So let's just see if we can just push through this in the next 10 minutes or so. Not to give short service to the Community Resilience Funding Project Selection Report, but CEO Morris?
Yes, thank you. So I'll be brief. We expected more from this program when it was announced in August. We were looking at larger degrees of funding, but what we've discovered since that time is yes, it will fund up to 100% of the program cost, but every municipality has a cap. And that cap, we understand, is based on the OSIF formula that's used across the province. So the reality is our cap is 175,000. We looked at 3 projects. This is the only one that would cap us out, that would qualify us for the full amount. So that's why we're bringing it forward. It's also a strategic plan priority. It's also in our asset management plan. So we think it ticks a lot of boxes, fits the criteria. We think we could put a strong application together. So, so what we're recommending is that we apply to access the 175,000. We think this is the most appropriate project. The bigger question, however, on the heels of our budget discussion we just had is this a project that council wants to proceed with in 2021? I know that's a big question, but if the answer is yes, then I would suggest we apply for the funding. If you have questions about that, I would suggest we have the budget discussion first and then come back to this one.
Okay, good question. Councillor Alford.
Yeah, I am very much in favor of finishing this phase 3. We have, as long as I have been around, substantial changes to that building have been deferred and deferred and deferred and deferred and deferred, till the point where it's doesn't even make any sense anymore to defer it anymore. So yes, I am very much in favor of going ahead with Town Hall phase 3.
And with applying for this funding to help cover that?
Certainly, if the CAO thinks that best matches and has the best chance of success, then why not get $175,000 towards the project? The one question I would ask is, because we may end up financing this if we go ahead, would that money be, would we get a bigger bang for our buck on bike paths and urban forest than we will on a $1 million project?
The short answer through the chair is no, because neither of those projects would equal 175,000. So we would be leaving money on the table, if I can put it in those terms.
No, don't, that's fine. I'm prepared to accept staff's recommendation.
Thank you. That's a yes and a yes. Mayor Panko?
Yeah, I agree, and we're all probably aware the cost of construction is rising far rapidly than the cost of inflation right now, and even if it does mean we have to borrow to complete the municipal complex renovation, I think in the end it's a lot cheaper to the taxpayer to get it done now or next year, even with the cost of borrowing, than to do it in future years when the cost could be significantly higher. And as for this funding, as much as I would have thought the number would be higher, if it was on a per capita basis, we would have got a lot more money. But I agree this is probably the best fit for it and the best bang for our buck.
Okay. Anybody opposed to the Councilor McGuire?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. CEO Morris, what percentage of funding did we get from grants for phase 1 and phase 2 of this project? Roughly speaking.
That is a great question, and I would look to Ms. Koziel or Mr. Manhire to answer that question. Art, do you have an answer?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we only received grants in the first phase of the town hall renovations. So, and that was a relatively small project. It amounted to about 240,000.
So the nature of this kind of project is that there aren't the big grants available that there are for roads and that kind of renewal. Okay. All right. I support the recommendation. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Koziel, please.
Just for this year, the big phase 2, it was for the majority, part of it was coming from the building services reserve. It was based on a percentage for that backstage, which was going to be in a different phase, but we thought it made sense to do it with this phase as well. And then there is capital borrowing of about 1.1 million. That will be obtained by the end of this year.
I'm seeing interest in applying for this funding, and then that would mean that we do want to proceed with phase 3 of the town hall renovations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're moving on to the proposed amendments to the Conservation Authority and Planning Act. Mayor Panko, you're going to speak to this?
Yes, thank you. As the town's representative on the RVCA, this has been something that's been discussed numerous times at our RVCA meetings for over a year. Councillor McKenna and I attended a public information session back last winter with the ministry and a variety of stakeholders. And so there was some degree of uncertainty as to how this would roll out. The conservation authorities basically were very much willing to adapt to some change, but there's a number of items in this proposal in Bill 229, Schedule 6, which I think will have a real negative effect on the operation of the CAs, make things much more difficult, much more cumbersome. So just at a high level, this has been lumped in with the budget bill, and the budget's going to be passed. If this is lumped in with and still included in the budget bill, it will be passed as part of this process. The objective at this stage is to request the province remove Section 6 from this bill, and it be dealt with separately and allow for more further public consultation. But there are a number of items in here, and I know time-wise that I hope that most people have the chance, most members of council have a chance to read through some information that has been provided. But small things, I guess, one, even wording, is that only members of councilors could be municipal representatives. So many of the people on the RVCA board of directors are not municipal councilors. They are appointed by the municipality. That would not be permissible anymore. It does say councilor, doesn't clarify if a mayor or a deputy mayor or reeve can serve. So if that follows through and that wording is indeed what's intended, one of you will have to take over my responsibilities of the RVCA. There is a number of items here which are going to make it very difficult. And all we ask tonight is that we take the lead that we've heard of the county and other municipalities, and as encouraged by the conservation, RVCA and other conservation authorities, and simply ask the province to pull this out and allow for the public consultation.
Thank you, Mayor Penko. I know that Lanark County passed a resolution in support of this, or about to, as did Leeds Grenville. Councilor Brennan, that's your point?
Yeah, to answer my question.
Okay. Yeah, they both.
Yeah, there is a proposed resolution which was shared from Deputy District Bennett earlier tonight, and we ask that committee support that. And if possible, we have a very quick council meeting to pass that resolution and move on.
Okay, thank you. I'm hearing a lot of nods. Thank you. Last but not least is the item 8F, the illicit cannabis resolution. We discussed this, I think a couple of weeks ago. And it was correspondence from our friends in Norfolk or Lincoln County, or one of our colleagues in Ontario had a number of illicit operations, and they were asking the federal and provincial governments to step up enforcement around the illicit cannabis production market in their communities. And they were looking for letters of support. Oh boy, let's go with Councillor McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support supporting the resolution and passing something at council. I think that based on my last count on following the news, I think 16,500 plants were seized in surrounding municipalities to Smith Falls this fall alone. When you look at the amount of effort that our local businesses are doing to get involved in this industry, and this is really undermining it. So I think we should show strong support and send a resolution to the province.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, I support it, certainly. And
okay.
I appreciate the background that CAO sent us today through media. But in Norfolk's resolution, they cite 70 cannabis operations in our municipality. Are we going to use a similar a number, or do we know a number of? We have no idea what's going on here, I guess.
Yeah, media reports.
Media reports, yeah.
Yeah.
I support it.
Yeah, great. I would like to wrap this up. Unfortunately, I just got a notice that my battery is getting really low. And so...
motion to adjourn.
No, is there support for this support letter? Yes, there is.
Yes.
Okay. Now we will, I believe, entertain a motion to adjourn and go into a quick council meeting. Moved by Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor McGuire. All in favor? Thank you very much. And I ask the public to hang in there with us for a couple more minutes.
I have someone that would be willing to move the motion that's scheduled on the council agenda tonight. We can make sure it's okay, Jay. Okay, Mayor Penko, Councillor Brennan will read that motion tonight that we have a.
Okay. Thank you.
The adjournment. Oh, sorry. Actually, that would mean Councillor Brennan has both items. Sorry, Councillor Brennan. Can I get someone else? Because you've got the adjournment. Councillor Alford. So Councillor Alford will read that. And then Councillor Brennan has the adjournment.
Okay.
Do I need a second, or do I not, Nadine?
Yes, yes, you'll need a seconder.
Councillor McKenna, okay.
Okay.
Oh, long.
So my computer is struggling here. Okay, there we go. Everybody is ready?
Yep.
Okay. I'd like to welcome everyone to the special meeting of Smith Falls Town Council for Monday, November 23rd. We have, unfortunately, regrets from Councillor Dwyer, who was unable to continue committee of the whole earlier. I have no announcements, lesser disclosure of monetary interest. I hear none. No delegations, no adoption of minutes, no reports, I assume, no bylaws. One miscellaneous motion, which is with Councillor McGuire.
Councillor Alfred.
Brennan. Alfred, sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McKenna. Whereas the province has introduced Bill 229, Protect, Support, and Recover from COVID-19 Act Schedule 6 Conservation Authorities Act. And whereas municipalities believe that the appointment of municipal representatives on CA boards would be a municipal decision and the chair and vice chair of the CA board should be duly elected. And whereas changes to the legislation will create more red tape and costs for the conservation authorities and their municipal partners and potentially result in delays in the development approval process. And whereas municipalities require a longer transition time to put in place agreements with conservation authorities for non-mandatory programs. And whereas municipalities of the Mississippi River and Rideau River watersheds value and rely on the natural habitats and water resources within our jurisdiction for the economic health and well-being of residents and our communities. And whereas we rely on the watershed expertise provided by local conservation authorities to protect residents' property and local natural resources on a watershed basis by regulating development, undertaking watershed scale studies, and planning and engaging in reviews of applications submitted under the Planning Act. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Province of Ontario delay enactment of clauses affecting municipal concerns. Number 2, that the Province of Ontario provide a longer transition period up to December 2022 for non-mandatory programs to enable coordination of CA municipal budget processes. Number 3, that the Province of Ontario respect the current conservation authority / municipal relationships. 4, that the Province of Ontario work with conservation authorities to address concerns by repealing and or amending changes to the Conservation Authorities Act and the Planning Act. And number 5, that the Province of Ontario hold meaningful public consultation on any future proposed changes to the Conservation Authorities Act.
Thank you. Any further discussion, Councillor Alfred?
No, Your Worship, we dealt with this just prior in COW that this is a valuable service that the RBCA provides to municipalities, and we want some say in how that changes and when it changes.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay. Moved by Councillor Alfred, second by Councillor McKenna. Bill 229, Schedule 6 changes to conservation authorities. Whereas the province has introduced Bill 229, Protect, Support, and Recover from COVID-19 Act, Schedule 6 Conservation Authorities Act. And whereas municipalities believe that the appointment of municipal representatives on CA board should be a municipal decision, and the chair and vice chair of the CA board should be duly elected. And whereas changes to the legislation will create more red tape and costs for conservation authorities and their municipal partners, potentially result in delays in the development approval process. And whereas municipalities require a longer transition time to put in place agreements with conservation authorities for non-mandatory programs. And whereas municipalities of the Mississippi River and Rideau River watersheds value and rely on the natural habitats and water resources within our jurisdiction for the economic health and well-being of residents and our communities. And whereas we rely on the watershed expertise provided by local conservation authorities to protect residents, property, and local natural resources on a watershed basis by regulating development, undertaking watershed scale studies and planning, and engaging in reviews of applications submitted under the Planning Act. Now therefore be resolved that the Province of Ontario delay enactment of clauses affecting municipal concerns. 2, that the Province of Ontario provide a longer transition period up to December 2022 for non-mandatory programs to enable coordination of CA municipal budget processes. 3, that the Province of Ontario respect the current conservation authority / municipal relationships. 4, that the Province of Ontario work with conservation authorities to address concerns by repealing and or amending changes to the Conservation Authorities Act and the Planning Act. And 5, that the Province of Ontario hold meaningful public consultation on any future proposed changes to the Conservation Authorities Act. All in favor? That's carried. I assume there's no inquiries or announcements? And Councillor Brennan, you have the motion for adjournment.
Pleasure. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Allen, that this council adjourn its proceedings at 8:24 p.m. and stands so adjourned until the next duly called meeting of council.
Thank you. Moved by Councilor Brennan, second by Councilor Allen. This council adjourns proceedings at 8:36 p.m. and stands to adjourn until the next duly called meeting of council. All in favor? It's after 8, somewhere after there.
Yeah.